Joel McLeod,
I'm Roland Tanner.
and welcome back to the 905 Roundup, ladies and gentlemen. It's actually, I think it's been a while since you and I have done one of these things, Roland, so
Yeah.
we might be a bit rusty, but none the worse for wear. Looking around the 905 this week, there's of course funky stuff happening in Hamilton. We're going to the other side of the 905, all the way to Durham and Darlington for some interesting news there. And then lastly, we're going up to Ottawa for some federal news. But starting us off, looking at Hamilton City Council, a recent police budget meeting where they were asking for public insight into the upcoming police budget was basically shut down. What do you got, Roland?
Yeah, so I mean, it was protesters turned up and attended the meeting, and my understanding, I mean, I didn't watch the proceedings, but my understanding is from the various reports that the protesters kind of interfered with the proceedings, and I'm not necessarily having a go at them for that. I'm just saying that the meeting was not able to carry on as planned as a result of the protests. I think that there was various chanting. There was attempts to get councillors on the floor to commit to vote against the increase to the police budget, and various sort of statements and backwards and forwards. And I guess the question is, I mean, there's been a number of sort of statements today from councillors, including the mayor, basically saying, this isn't the way to go about things. And there was quite a bit of pushback from members of the public, or from the members of the public who comment about these things on Twitter, saying, kind of, this is a normal part of a democratic process, and don't be so sort of narrow-minded and let the protesters do their thing. I'm kind of caught between a rock and a hard place in this one. I mean, I think I absolutely have sympathy with the idea of just the continual, never-ending increases in police budgets that tend to go through councils on the nod, pretty much. The budgets are set by the Police Services Board, and then they're voted on by council. And let's just say, I don't think it's particularly normal or common for a council or a regional council or any level of council to vote against those increases for whatever reason. I suspect if they did, there might be problems, and it's one of those powers that maybe cities kind of have but kind of don't have. But anyway, in theory, the council can say, we don't want to increase this budget, and the budget won't increase. I kind of felt, just from reading the accounts, again, very sympathetic to the point of not increasing the budget. The way that this protest happened, I kind of feel I do have some sympathy for the point of view of the councillors, which is like, it wasn't as if the protesters came in and allowed the councillors to have a debate, and then it became clear which way the vote was going to go. And at that point, they said, no, this is outrageous. You shouldn't be supporting this. Protests kind of started from the perspective of preventing debate and preventing conversation, just saying, do what we say. And that's kind of a funny thing to say in a democratic forum, and I know someone said this point on Twitter, and I think Laura Babcock kind of said, it's kind of whataboutism. And I'm not sure if it is whataboutism if you say that, if I suspect I know how I would feel if it was a cause I was less sympathetic to that was doing a protest in a similar way and disrupting the process of council's business. I suspect I would think they were jerks, and I would say, kick the bums out. I'm not going to, just because I'm sympathetic with this cause, why should my reaction be any different? Saying that they should, I think some of the statements were like, you should be representing us,
Yeah.
Like, well, councillors do represent the public. They represent all voters, and whether we like that or not all voters are against increasing police budgets. We, you know,
Well,
the unfortunate fact of democracy is you don't always get your way. But
but I think that's what this process demonstrates. Is kind of the farce of municipal government at the moment. Is that the idea behind this is, okay, you throw open the doors to the public to come in and petition your municipal government to vote one way or the other. The reality is the majority of the people at that at the council table have already made up their minds. Like they would have been told uh, by city staff, presumably, here's the budget. This is the reasoning behind certain items in the budget. Like they're not going in blind and ignorant to the situation. They would have, if they were smart, they would have read up on the issue. They would have heard from constituents, but the decision has already been made, which I agree. Like we do have to let the process kind of unfold, but I also kind of sympathize with the protesters. Is that it's a farce in their mind that they come in and they say, well, how do we influence change on this matter? But that being, keep in mind, there are a number of new councilors on this council that were elected as kind of those disruptors. There, that grassroots protest movement elected a number of councilors to the council with this exact thing in mind. Right now, Cameron Crutch has come out publicly saying that he supports defunding the police, based on his personal experience and what he's heard from his supporters.
well, I think he's. I don't know if I'd use those exact words, but certainly
Uh,
he's
it's
come
not
out
the-
saying he wouldn't support the increase in budget, just to be more sort of,
Fair enough. I'll concede that point. But again, this the public has been emboldened because they elected a number of councilors who are kind of a rabble rouser, disruptor. We're going to change the status quo. This is a perfect instance where they want to see that status quo changed. I don't think they have a lot of faith in the system because the system hasn't allowed them to express themselves effectively or fairly. It was so easy for the previous councils to basically ignore their whims and their concerns at the table. And how many times were meetings just held outright for in-camera sessions, and public inquiry was not permitted at all. So that's kind of this is the result of it, is when people get a chance to voice their concern, they'll take advantage of it. Did they go too far? I'm going to say yes, mostly because ultimately the meeting nothing happened. The vote will still happen. It might sound like, oh, they got to win. They really didn't. They just postponed it to another date. And if they shut down that meeting, they'll postpone the meeting to another date. Like the vote will happen.
Well, and what eventually happens is the public are shut out of the meeting.
Yes.
And that's a shame when that happens. I mean, so as I say, I mean, delegation is a funny business. I'd say on the whole, I'd rather the delegation continues to exist than doesn't continue to exist, but it is a bit of a farce quite often. And there are no. I get what it is to be an activist, and you win no prizes by playing by the rules when you're an activist. If you're and I should put it out, this was a peaceful protest. It wasn't. This is no January the 6th kind of business. But it was a disruptive, peaceful process, and intentionally so. And I think it's fair to make that distinction. I also think we should point out that just today there's an article in the CBC about the Hamilton police officer, acting Sergeant Brian Wren, who reportedly stomped and kicked Patrick Tomchuk's head 13 times, and he's currently in front of the courts on that cause. And and it's like I think it is completely appropriate to mention that kind of context when we're seeing the movement against just never-ending increases to police budgets. However, I don't know. However, I'm kind of caught trying to have both sides of this argument at once, and I appreciate that I can't actually do that. I think I would have liked to have seen more sort of faith in letting the councillors screw up before you start protesting. I don't think they've really got a chance to get that far. It's just like, do what we say. And when people start going into any political institution, any democratic institution, and saying, do what we say, I kind of go, yeah, not really too keen on that. I want the elected people to do what the elected people are supposed to do. And God knows I don't have a lot of faith in that system, but it's the best system we've got.
At some point, we're in a democracy, and at some point you have to turn over your faith and your trust in the system to the people that you elected. I know a lot of these individuals are putting their support and their faith behind a number of counselors around the table. At some point, you have to let the play happen and see where it goes. Trying to hold the council hostage until they vote the way they want. You're right. It'll end up going to an in-camera session to avoid disruptions and whatnot, and that will be that. What you want to do is let this happen in daylight, in the spotlight. That way, you know exactly who is still on your side and who is and who is going to quiver, or who might have just outright lied to earn your support. Like, you've got to let these counselors do their thing and see where they are. You might be heartbroken. I admit it. It happens all the time, unfortunately. That's why we have a democracy. That's why we have elections. You elect them out. But you have to let the process happen. And this is like, to me, this was like the first litmus test. This is the first real test of that new council. See, like, where do these people's loyalties lie, and how closely are they listening to the public to get a sense of it. You have to let the vote happen at some point, and you either trust in the system or you don't. In which case, then why are you even at City Hall?
Yeah, and well, like I say, I have my doubts that that a vote by a city council is really ultimately what decides what a police budget is. But that's for another day.
But you know where the councillors stand on the issue. You know, are they going to fold like a cheap suit, and cater to other pressure, or are they going to stand by their convictions that got them elected there and say, yeah, I'm voting against it? Or
to an extent, like you say, this was an opportunity. You got to let the new council have the opportunity to screw up, or to vote the way you don't want. You don't want them to vote on issue X or Y. There are clearly some councillors who are sympathetic to not increasing the budget. More councillors than would have been sympathetic before October. Whether there's enough, I don't know. Probably not, but certainly it's it's a difference.
Gotta let them do it.
And the leader of the protesters is an elected person themselves. They're a trustee for Ward 2 in the school board, in the Hamilton Wentworth School Board. Again, well, if you find that your job as trustee is getting interrupted by people coming and protesting every week, you might sort of see the other side of this. It's like, well, hang on a minute, who's the person with the votes in this room? Is it me, or is it you guys sitting in the crowd there? Now, I don't want to sound like some kind of elitist jackass, but I do believe in the votes part of the deal. Ultimately, a lot of councillors are assholes, and I'll be the first to say that. But even Terry Whitehead had the votes behind him, and you have to actually respect that somewhere along the line. So yeah, it's I'm not going to say, like I say, it was a peaceful protest and civil disobedience. These are all part of our democratic culture, so totally understand that and get it and respect it. But it's you need to put a lot of thought into it before you start, disrupting actual meetings where the democracy is happening, if you see what I mean.
Let's take a break from that, and we'll come back with our next our next story. Okay, and we are back. So we're going to take a trip to a part of the 905 we just don't get to travel to as much as we like to, and that's over to Durham, to Darlington. With it, don't say this too often, but I think we have a good news story from the Ford government. So this past month, last month, it should be said that a story that kind of slipped under our radar, but we picked it back up at the Darlington site east of Toronto. In Clarington, Ontario, they're going to put in what's called a small modular nuclear reactor at the Darlington site out near Pickering in Durham region. Basically to I guess replace the aging Darlington plant that's there that was slated to shut down early in the year, and this will help greenify our electrical grid. All in all, I think it's a good thing. A plan is this new small modular reactor was be Ontario's first nuclear reactor built, basically in a generation, according to the news release. And it's estimated that it's going to deliver about 300 megawatts of electricity, which is about enough to power about 300,000 homes in Ontario. Right now, the group that is behind the construction of this project is the Ontario Power Generation, GE Hitachi Nuclear Energy, SNC Lavalin Group, and AECON Group will be the team to build this, with slated to be completed by late 2028. I'm in favor of this, and I think that the nuclear energy has always kind of been a staple of Ontario's greenifying the electrical grid. At least I seem to remember it back when McGuinty was still was in premier, and he brought in. Everybody was talking about him bringing in the windmills and the solar panels. That was in the microfit program, and that was a whole uproar. Remember all the birds that were going to be slaughtered by the windmills. But in that plan to shut down the coal-fired plants, bringing green electricity to power our homes and economy, part of it was eventually including nuclear power in it. So I'm glad to see Doug Ford following kind of through on that plan and committing to this.
Yeah, I guess I think it's broadly good too. I mean, talk about controversial issues. I mean, issues that people have strong opinions about. Police and nuclear power. Probably lose half our audience on these two. Yeah, I mean, I don't see a way around nuclear power at the moment. I mean, the fair point well made that if we're going to have electric cars, which I guess we are, then
we need
there's a hell of a lot of electricity that's going to be needed to power those cars, and that's not going to come from the existing infrastructure. I mean, it kind of makes the point that the idea that electric cars solve all the problems is not entirely, not even a little bit accurate. It's just shifting the problem somewhere else. There's no perfect source of power, is there? Someone will object to everything pretty much, and it is somewhat ironic that I suspect this story about a new generation of nuclear power generation will attract a tiny fraction of the notice that wind power did. So people get a lot more upset about their view of a hill than because I'm basically a supporter of nuclear power, but at the same time, if it goes wrong, boy, does it go wrong. The stakes are the highest.
Well, we've all seen Chernobyl.
Yeah,
but here's the thing. Like, in Canada, we know nuclear power. Like I know people like to think, oh, the Canadian are going to screw this up because that's just what we do. We don't. Um, like before Stephen Harper sold it off, the CANDU nuclear reactor was kind of the go-to model of nuclear reactors on the market. Like, granted, it was only governments who could buy the thing, but it had a reputation of being efficient, reliable, and safe to operate. And so, if you're a first world country looking to buy a nuclear reactor, the CANDU nuclear reactor was kind of the go-to staple. It was reliable. I'm confident that this will work. What my concern is this has the sniffings of a potential gas plant scandal all over again for the Tories. What was this say that history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes? Like that, you point out, like you're not anticipating anybody really being opposed to this. That's quite possibly true. This might fly completely under the radar for a good number of years. However, so did the gas plants until an election season when they got mysteriously moved. The danger of this happening, because we've seen Doug Ford fold like a cheap suit when the pressure is on. If by the next, and these aren't going to be completed until 2028, so there's still another election cycle between here and then to push these things out of Darlington and move them either somewhere else or cancel them altogether. I'm wait and see. I know there's a lot of ifs and there's a lot of things moving on the board, but this, I guess that's my concern, is that this is going to all end up being for naught, because this government has a reputation. Like, again, I've said this before on this podcast, this government does not have a reputation of getting any wins. They lay out plans and they suck at execution. And I would really like to see them win on this one. I really would. I really do want them to execute this, bring it in on budget and on time, or relatively close to it. My concern is this government just doesn't have the reputation, and I don't have the confidence that they're going to get this through. Forget on time or on budget. I just don't. My concerns are just not get it through the finish line.
Well, we'll see. Yeah, I mean, I guess it comes back to that point about the 905 region being where elections are won and lost.
Yeah,
the whole
right.
gas plant scandal. I mean, there was no mystery about it. It was completely out in the open as to why those gas plants were cancelled, and it was because of public opposition. And it wasn't like the government didn't hide that fact. They were like, yeah, the public doesn't want them. We agree. We don't actually need them anymore. There's been a massive global downturn. Yep. Let's not build them, or let's not build one of them and let's move the other one.
Right.
Again, it's like, that's democracy, right? But whatever. I suspect the fact that the people of Darlington have been living next to a nuclear power station, a nuclear power plant for the last half century or whatever,
right,
means that there'll be less opposition, and but we'll see. I guess time will tell. Time will tell.
Time will tell.
All those seats are potentially marginal in any kind of election where the opposition can put up a decent leader.
And we shall wait and see about what time will tell on that one. Our last story for the episode, folks. We've been wanting to do a story on healthcare for some time now, and we've been banging our heads against the wall to find somebody of credible note to come on and kind of explain what the heck is going on in our hospitals. Hopefully, things are going to be getting better because today, February 7th, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau pitched a 10-year healthcare deal with a total of, just hang on here, folks, $196.1 billion, that's billion with a B, dollars on healthcare for the next decade. And that includes $46.2 billion in new spending on top of funds already budgeted for that. At least that's what the CBC is reporting here. Of course, the provinces are hemming and humming about this, and it's not enough or whatnot. Part of the conditions, I believe, on this one is that the federal government wants data on our healthcare system. They want to be able to see where this money is going and if it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. Um, which is something that I'm not surprised that it's not. Like, we don't actually have any national standards in terms of healthcare outcomes. And are we getting a good ROI on the tax dollars that we're spending on healthcare? Uh, I, with the current trajectory of where majority of the conservative governments are focused in regards to healthcare in this province, namely the privatization of our healthcare system. Um, I'm kind of hoping that the feds are going to do a little bit more of a hard line in the sand and say, this is it. If you want the money for healthcare, this is it. And I think the premiers would be fools to refuse this money. This is a 10-year deal. This is it. Like, this will hopefully help solve it, and we learn where we're going wrong on delivery and outcomes. But I this is it. Like, I don't know what the premiers want other than Ottawa just cutting them a blank check.
I think that's exactly what they want.
But like, I don't care for that, because here's the thing: you cut Doug Ford a blank check, he goes to start building Highway 413 north of Toronto.
It's the hypocrisy of our system writ large, that the mainly conservative premiers of Canada are all about fiscal responsibility until it comes to taking money from the federal government, at which point they're the biggest subsidy junkies on the planet, and they always want more. It's I mean, I guess I understand why that is. What else are they supposed to do? But yeah, I mean, the whole core of this thing, since from the last election, was that this negotiation or funding was going to happen, and that the federal government was going to try and extract a few strings to this thing. Because basically how it is right now is like, okay, we'll give you this amount of money, do what you like with it, and you can spend it on partying and expensive bottles of champagne, as far as the federal government's concerned, because there's no checks and balances kind of really involved. And it absolutely should do. And the provinces are going to moan if the federal government says, well, here's healthcare funding. We'd really like it if you actually spent it on healthcare, which seems pretty reasonable request to me. Yeah, I mean, what am I saying here other than great, more money? Do I trust the provinces, certainly the province of Ontario, to spend that money wisely, or even remotely close to the thing that the money is meant to be spent on? Nope. Basically, there were billions of dollars spent during the COVID-19, in 2020 in particular, that just didn't get to where it was supposed to go.
Well,
As far as I can
there's no.
see.
I mean, that was the case of, yeah, like there was no strings on that money, mostly because I think the nature of the pandemic and the rush to get money out to save the economy after shutting down, the feds are just, we're making this up literally as we go. There's no pandemic spending program that you just activate. They're making up on the fly and pumping out billions of dollars into the economy. So yeah, provinces got all this money, no strings attached. They loved it. They could funnel it to, or finding out now that a lot of it went to just private enterprises or people close to the powers that be, at least here in Ontario, for that money. And I think the feds kind of learned the lesson and said, okay, this time around though, we need to know where this money's going. I'll be honest, what I'm kind of thankful for is at the federal level, getting some data that will inform future spending. That and maybe to start setting some benchmarks that, yeah, instead of just saying, oh, we're going to cut wait times, which is amorphous statement in itself. Like, what does that mean? We're going to cut wait times. Like, should we not try to aim for just a standard wait time metric? Like, you can't no longer than a month to get hip or knee surgery or whatever have you. It's this amorphous talking point healthcare policy that we've been relying on for as long as I've been alive. And I'm kind of like I'm give credit to Trudeau where it's due to say no. We're going to start actually having some metrics and develop clear standards to say, which province is actually delivering the best healthcare. Is it the Maritimes? Is it Quebec? Is it hell? Maybe Ontario and Alberta have it right with this privatization model. Maybe it is the best model to pursue, and we just need to get the data to prove it. But I don't understand the objection to it, because if it proves your point, then you're all for it.
The objection is that it puts constraints on the province's ability to do what the hell they want. And obviously they're going to, obviously they're going to object to that. I think it's absolutely the way it should work. I mean, the federal government hands out money to the provinces. Basically the federal government's job is to kind of hand out money to the provinces, with the exception of the military and foreign policy and a relatively indigenous matters. The federal government doesn't have that many things that it actually does itself. Seems that way to me, unless so an awful lot of what the federal government does is about redirecting money from federal coffers to provincial coffers. And I think that if that's the way you want to do it, then for God's sake, put some strings on it, because right now it's like, it seems ridiculous to me that the federal government bails out conservative governments for running down healthcare, for cutting their taxes or putting less money into healthcare on their end. And then the federal government comes in and says, okay, well, look, your healthcare system isn't working, so here's another 60 billion or however many billion it was,
right,
to sort it out. And the provinces go, oh yeah, thanks very much. Well, from the taxpayer's point of view, what the hell does it make? I mean, it's like all you've done is upload the costs from one part of your tax bill to another part. Meanwhile, the federal government is bailing out these feckless bums in the provinces who are doing everything they can to destroy healthcare, destroy education, destroy anything that most of us hold dear. And it's like it's a crummy deal, and I'm not really sure why the federal government wants to play along with it, other than I guess it's their job.
Well, I mean, it's part of like the Canada Health Act is just that federal standard. Ever since that the Federal Health Act, the federal government really has been kind of the bankroll for the entire healthcare system. The fact that the provinces kind of administer it, it's kind of a lark, in my opinion. Like if Doug Ford turns away this deal, if he says I'm backing out of Ontario's portion of this $196 billion 10-year deal, what's he going to do? Like, where's the alternative? Is he going to hand it over to Galen Weston to charges? Because I'm pretty sure you'd find some organization taking that whole thing to court and say that's a violation of the Health Act right off the bat. And I think if he did that, Doug Ford's chance for a third term for Doug Ford should be toast. But well, that remains to be seen in terms of what opposition we have coming forward in the next few years. Ultimately, I think they'll take this deal. They're going to have to. They don't have any other option.
I mean, this is the way politics works in Canada. I find it frustrating and annoying to see, two conservative premiers. Just looking at the CBC article here, one of whom is Doug Ford, basically saying it's not enough money. It's not enough money.
Right.
The hypocrisy, the sheer brass neck of it, for them to come out with that, when if the boot was on the other foot, they would not be doing it. It's a ridiculous system. I feel like that, if with the money that the if the federal government wants to pay for healthcare, then God damn it, the federal government should provide the healthcare. If it's down to the provinces to provide the healthcare, then it should be through the provincial taxes that the healthcare is paid for. Let people be accountable for what they're doing, because this way is just stupid. It's particularly stupid for the federal government, but it also leaves us as the people who use the system at the whim of this crazy system.
Let's say here's a problem with Doug Ford saying it's not enough money. It's not enough money because he can't charge all these private nursing clinics, right? That are that he's now relying on to fix the gaps in our staffing problems in our hospitals. They cost a fortune. That you can't be forking over public coffers to that indefinitely. It's not going to work. And that's why he needs more money. Like, he needs more money to be able to pay all those staffing agencies that are owned by Mike Harris's wife, to pay them the exorbitant fees that they're charging now to the province. That was supposed to be a temporary fix, but it looks like they're quickly going to turn that into like the go-to standard for this province. Whereas it would be far more cheaper, far more efficient, and far more ethical just to say, no, just pay the nurses fairly right out of the public purse, and make sure that all of our hospitals and ERs and operating rooms are staffed up as they're supposed to be.
I literally just think the federal government shouldn't be in the business of bailing out bad provincial governments. It's stupid. It's the behavior of enablers. Let the provinces, if the provinces aren't managing healthcare properly, which they're not, then let them bloody hang on that problem. And if the federal government feels the need to pay for healthcare, then the federal government should be bloody running it. I mean, it's not going to happen. I'm saying something that isn't going to happen.
Well,
and no one would
it's not going to happen, because in 4 years' time, if we're stuck with Ford for the next 4 years, we have to. If you're going to say let's hang him out to dry on healthcare, we can in 4 years, but that's going to be a long 4 years if we have people needing urgent treatment and care, and they can't get it because
just pass an act turning healthcare into a federal jurisdiction. I don't know. You can't even do that.
Nope, can't do that.
I'm sure it's in the damn Constitution.
Yep.
Well, once again, the Constitution comes in to save us all, like it never does. It's constitutions are a pain in the ass, I have to say, because every damn mistake made in 1860 or whatever the hell it was, we're stuck with forever. Things that they didn't even think about properly at the time that they wrote it, we were stuck with. I just think if why, if it's a provincial responsibility, is the federal government paying for it? I don't get that. Let the provinces deal with it. I'm probably starting to sound like a Tory now.
You are, because there's a. Well, it's because if that was the case, I'm getting into poli sci 101.
Yeah.
It basically comes down to your people did this to us wrong.
Oh, right. It's all the British's fault.
It's the British fault. Is basically what it comes down to. You didn't trust that. You didn't want us to get uppity, so let's have you all. Let's divide and conquer like we did.
Cool. Yeah. No. Well,
let's do to Canada what they did to India, and keep the colonies in line, because they didn't want us to get uppity and do a whole American Revolution on them again. So that's basically why we have things the way we are.
Well, as I'm yet to go to a country where I didn't feel the need to apologize.
Nope,
for something that my country at birth had done. So I'm glad to include Canada on that list.
Oh yeah. All right, folks, let's call it a night on that one. Thanks very much for listening. We'll be back next week. Bye-bye.
All right.